Hey, welcome to another edition of Bush Office. I want to talk to you today about an event that happened to me in 1996, a real interesting and wild tale from the Colombian Amazon, right on the border with Ecuador, actually. And it's a tale of sorcery and psychedelics, and there's a little unfortunate military flavour to it as well. But I was doing a PhD with Sydney University and on an Australian government scholarship and numerous bursaries and grants to go over and study ayahuasca shamanism in the Colombian Amazon with Turkanawan speaking peoples. Where I landed was with the Kofan, and in particular my chief informant and teacher was a Kofan shaman, or curandero, they got a lot of names, ayahuasquero, yerbatero, vegetalista, Taita. Anyway, Taita Diomedes Diaz and his wife Ophelia, brilliant shamans and a fantastic husband and wife team in the curacion business, and their clientele was mostly indigenous and mestizo native Colombians. But he was catering to starting to cater to a few tourists. I used to go there on my own from Quito. I'd get the bus to Lago Agrio. Its other name is Nueva Loja. It's a dirty border town near Colombia, and then from there we'd go to Santa Rosa de Sucumbias, and then motorised canoe down to Diomedes' place. And on this occasion, for the first time, I took a fair few friends with me. Tim Sparkman, a native of Tennessee, and who was a friend I'd befriended him in Quito. And I took I was supervising in the field a couple of graduate medical students from Sydney University, Meta McNeil and Matt Watts. Matt Watts is a dear friend and still is. And he and Meta managed to swing a grant to come and study under me for a month in the Faculty of Medicine. They were studying non-Western approaches to health management and healing, and indigenous Amazonian perspectives on that. So they came with me on this particular occasion. On the dozens of previous, or maybe a dozen previous visits that I'd had there, there'd been no incidents at all. But on this occasion, we got there, and Tim rolled up a joint with a mix of piel roja tobacco, which just about a single drag will rip your lungs apart, Jim, and mixed that with Punta Roja, which is a real strong red point Colombian weed, you know. So we'd just smoked a joint, which made me paranoid at the best of times. But suddenly, to add to my paranoia exponentially, the jungle seemed to come alive. We were just sitting on the veranda of Diomedes' place, and he wasn't there. He was up at Santa Rosa de Sucumbias at a powwow, like a trade swap meet with shamans from the Andes. They come down from the Cordillera de los Andes and swap different herbs and medicines and ideas, and it's just a get together and a party, drink chicha, that sort of thing. But anyway, we were sitting on his veranda, his sons were all there, and we were looking back across the Rio San Miguel river into Ecuador. And this is 1996, so we're right in the Putumayo, Departamento de Putumayo, right on the, in that region, you know, near the Valpes and the Aguarico and the Rio San Miguel, all these rivers. And the Rio San Miguel being right on the border with Ecuador means that it's a point for the Colombian guerrilla in those days to escape. So the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, the FARC, there had just been a firefight, which we found out later, in which two of them were killed, actually. It was a really serious incident. And they had fled, being chased by the Colombian military across the river into Ecuador, where they were hiding and they assumed some degree of safety because the Colombian military weren't meant to violate the territorial integrity of Ecuador and to shell them across the river or to chase them into Ecuador. So the Colombian military had followed them, and then they turned up. We'd just smoked this joint, and suddenly the forest came alive. And what it turned out to be was out of the jungle. The jungle seemed to just come alive, but it was the military guys with bits of foliage attached to their helmets and hats and well, not helmets. They all wore slouch hats. And they had all of this stuff sort of attached to them to blend into the forest. So I'm sitting there, bien enyerbada, tronchito, stoned as a moose. And the jungle starts walking toward me. And my heart sank, absolutely. And it's amazing what you do when you think you're faced with imminent death. In school, we always learnt about the so-called flight or fight response. And I can tell you there's a third option where you neither run nor fight. You just simply go weak at the knees and do nothing, which is exactly what I did and what the rest of my friends did. So we're sitting there, and I notice amongst this group of about 60 soldiers, all of them, except two, were younger than me. I was in my 20s, mid-20s. And these kids were all 18, 19. And they looked frightened, like they had just come from a firefight, which indeed they had. And there were some African-American faces amongst them. So I sort of worked out soon, and there were no women. So I worked out this isn't the guerrilla, because the guerrilla don't have African-American soldiers. They're mostly indigenous at the time, and they had a lot of women in their ranks as well. So I worked out this is the Colombian military. But before I worked that out, I became quite convinced that we were going to be frog marched into the forest and shot in the back of the head. Now, my reasoning for this, or held captive, but anyway, in that moment, far from running or taking the option to somehow fight or do anything, as I say, I went weak and attempted bravely to go, hola, and all that came out was, hola! And so the third option was invoked, do nothing. And in that moment, instead of having a profound fear, the fear gave way to an overwhelming, blissful, and transcendent sense of equanimity and wonder. And it was as if I was a mere witness watching Roberto and his trials and tribulations and imminent sufferings and death. So I had an out-of-body mystical experience in which everything was okay, and I thought, well, this Robert guy is going to die, but it doesn't matter. And I watched it from a distance in that sense, and then I had this profound sense of how beautiful and wondrous this place was that I had somehow, in some sense, chosen to die in. But as it happened, we weren't to die that day, and these soldiers were okay, except for two of them. Well, the one guy had little man syndrome. There was this little fella in, most of them had long pants on and full kit, but the drill sergeant who ran the whole show was in his mid-40s. He had a cowboy hat, short khaki dungarees, he had a machete slung across here, and he had a machine gun slung over his back, and he had his pistol drawn, and he marched up to us with his gumboots on and his dungarees. And that was when I thought I was going to die. But then he started talking, and Tim Sparkman shat himself, because we'd had an earlier incident where a soldier had come up to us in a town, drawn his pistol and said, "Who here is from the United States of America?" And Tim had answered, "Canada," on that occasion. "England, Australia, New Zealand, England, Canada. Oh, no one from the USA? Oh, we're all friends then." And puts his pistol away. So Tim was obviously on edge as to admit his nationality was United States of America. So he said he was Canadian, and I said Australian. He went, "Oh, País de los Cangurus, okay." And we started chatting to these fellas, and as I say, for the 4 days we were held, or 3 full days we were held captive, only the drill sergeant was a dickhead during the whole process. We soon made friends with these young 18-year-olds. We found out that they're paid about $4 US a month at the time, nothing. And they're straight out of school and they had no other options but to join the military. Otherwise, they'd be just unemployed in Bogota or Cali or somewhere. And they really had nothing else going for them than to join the military. They weren't particularly patriotic or exuberant in their newfound career. But anyway, we soon made friends with them. I had my guitar. I swapped it for one guy's machine gun for the purposes of posing for photographs. So I posed with him. He had my guitar and I had his machine gun. They had these little grenade launchers, which is like, imagine a giant revolver, an old Smith & Wesson revolver, but a giant thing that you can put 6 of these cartridges about that size in, and they fire these grenade things. I posed with those for a few photos, as did Matt Watts. And then we really earned their respect because we went up to the jumping rocks where the Rio San Miguel takes a little corner right near Ecuador, and then down to the Colombian side. There's high rocks in Diomedes' place, and you could jump off into this hole and then swim back to shore. Anyway, Tim Sparkman did a backflip off that after sharing a line of coke with these guys and another joint, and they thought he was really fantastic. And we were instantly the best of friends with these guys, and we continued to jump off these jumping rocks for the whole 3 or 4 days. We were captive. Now, being captive by the Colombian military isn't like in the movies where you're shackled and put in some little bunker or whatever. They set up the 50 caliber machine gun up at the jumping rocks because it commands an overall position where you could strafe and rake that whole area right across into Ecuador and right along the Rio San Miguel River. You could see everything from there. And they set that up and said, look, do what you like. You can run around. We know you're not going anywhere. We're holding you because we don't want you to go back to Santa Rosa de Sucumbias and warn the guerrilla that we're here waiting for them. So after a few days, you can probably leave, depending on what they're doing, if we locate them or not, or we find out they've moved on. But so we were free to do whatever we liked, and we spent most of the time just hanging out with these cats, playing cards, and during that first day. And anyway, my friend Matt never really relaxed into it. And when we first met them, and this little drill sergeant with the little man syndrome was really giving us all a hard time, Matt, who didn't even speak Spanish at the time, asked me to translate for him and said, Robert, can you explain to this bloke that I'm not fucking coping and that I'm going to go and lie down? And I said, well, Matt, he's already said that we're not free to go and lie down, and I think you should probably listen to his orders. And Matt said, no, I'm not coping. I need to go and lie down. So I explained this to the bloke, and then Matt explained it to him again in an angry English, and the guy went, okay then. So Matt went and lay down and stayed lying down for the duration of that day. And later on, the couple of the soldiers commandeered one of the shaman's kids' canoes, one of Diomedes' kids' little dugouts, and they paddled it out, not a motorised one of the really little ones, and they paddled it out into the middle of the San Miguel, and then suddenly this big mushroom cloud appears out of the water, as if a manta ray had landed, this fountain of water, and I thought, holy shit, we're under attack. And we thought we were being shelled with mortar fire from the other side of the river by the guerrilla. But then the other guys on the shore said, no, they're just fishing. So they were just gelignite fishing in the middle of the river. So we relaxed again after that. The heart skipped a beat. We relaxed again. And then later on that day, Diomedes returned from Santa Rosa de Sucumbias. Now, far from tiptoeing around like we were and scraping and bowing to these 60 soldiers who had set up their hammocks under his longhouse, which is on stilts, and made themselves at home, even killed a couple of his chickens, and generally terrorised everyone by being obnoxious and bristling with weaponry and cleaning their weaponry and abusing and threatening his family. far from tiptoeing back up from the riverbank as he arrived home, he had already heard all about their presence, and he came storming up screaming at them and called them a bunch of cowards, and he'd heard about the firefight and said that they were killers and murderers and that 2 people had been killed. And then he challenged them to drink ayahuasca and to atone for their sins and their demons. And I was thinking, oh no. I was Diomedes' assistant in the Maloca, which is his long room, which had a cement floor and otherwise was a very traditional Turkanoan, Kofan, Siana Sequoian sort of Maloca in that style, with the paintings, the ayahuasca-inspired, phosphenic sort of inspired archetypal imagery from ayahuasca use. And he challenged them all to come and drink ayahuasca. On the first night, 20 of them did. On the second night, another 20 did. And the word got around that this was a great thing to do. So by the end of it, all of these 60 kids had a go, 20 each a night. And even the drill sergeant did on the last night, the guy with little man syndrome, who was a true dickhead. Anyway, he remained a dickhead even after his ayahuasca experience and the insights it provided him. But it also facilitated our escape. I'll tell you about that in a moment. So on the first night, I'm Diomedes' assistant in the side room where his mesa, his altar is, and he strips these kids down to their waist and whips them with ortega, which is the stinging nettle, after they've peaked on ayahuasca, which is of course the combination between Banisteropsis caapi and Psychotria viridis. In an earlier bush office edition, I showed you around my forest here and some of my ayahuasca plantings. It grows beautifully in northern New South Wales. But anyway, I remember in the half-light around sunset, when the trip started to come on and you started hearing these guttural screams and roars from the kids just before they start vomiting and shitting themselves on the ayahuasca. And one of them got a bit agitated and came up to me with one of these little grenade launchers. And I said, "Oh, hermano, sí, está bien. Estás bien enyerbado." But and I told him, "Look, it's okay. I know you're tripping pretty hard, but I'm happy to trip with you, brother, but let's just take this grenade launcher off you." So by the end of the night, I'd put a few machine guns and grenade launchers and pistols in the side room where Diomedes does his Ortega healings, and I disarmed a whole heap of these kids just in case, you know. At the best of times, even on acid, people can freak out, let alone something imminently more powerful like ayahuasca. You know, the only plant medicine comparable to ayahuasca is DMT, which is, you know, of similar chemistry, or mescaline. But yeah, I mean, it just attests to the brilliance of Diomedes and his wife Ophelia as curanderos, as wonderful healers, that they managed 60 young, heavily armed kids full of demons in a very highly militarized area where the guerrilla could have returned at any time. And for him to keep his cool like he did, it just shows what an incredible shaman he is. And he goes into ecstatic trance 4 nights a week on behalf of his local community, fellow Cofanos, indigenous people and mestizo people who visit his practice. The guy has the endurance of an ox and sleeps during the day for just a few hours, and then goes and tends the garden and organises all that sort of thing. And then of a night time, he's in trance. He keeps up a monotonous Rio Aguarico, Rio Putumayo, Rio San Miguel, us, 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 us. He keeps up a monotonous chant and healing incantations and physical manipulation of malevolent spiritual sorcery substance, and expelling it from the body and vomiting it away, sucking and blowing and massaging this malevolent sorcery substance out of the bodies of sick people and vomiting it away. All misadventure, sickness and illness virtually is attributed to sorcery. And sorcery substance is considered in very practical and mundane terms, not as some supernatural thing, but as a physical presence in the body that has to be expelled through shamanic practice. And so he would drink ayahuasca, unlike in the West, where the patient takes the medicine and the doctor prescribes it. In shamanic cultures, both patient and doctor take the medicine. And the doctor takes the medicine in order to be able to see into the body as though it were glass, and to be able to see that malevolent sorcery substance, be it a feather or a dart or some claw or something that's been inserted through spiritual malevolent practice into the body of the sick person. There's nothing really in traditional Amazonian shamanism, Kofan and Turkanoan and Desana, all these different tribes I've visited in Colombia and Ecuador. In the 90s, there certainly was nothing like a catering to Western needs. The Westerners are typically interested in self-discovery and getting to know the self, whereas really shamanism is not about that at all. It's a useful and welcome byproduct, and in my practice here, I certainly use it for that with people that come and drink with me. But traditionally, it's nothing to do with that. It's just about the removal of pathogenic sorcery substance from the body in very practical, mundane sense. There are other things that shamans do, such as use it to maybe, for example, make a hunt more successful, or to transform into animals. The jaguar complex is very strong in northwest Amazonia, but people also transform into anacondas and tapirs, and there are many different parts of the shamanic profession in the Colombian Amazon and northwest Amazonia in general. A lot of it is about the increase of game animals to do that sort of thing. Also, midwifery is an important aspect of shamanism. A shaman, pregnant women might consult a shaman in order to have a safe childbirth. There's dozens of different things, but ensuring the presence of game animals is a really strong aspect of the vocation of shaman there. But I digress. Back to the story. So Diomedes challenged them all. They all drink. Now, there was one friend, a Colombian, who was not like your usual Colombian. He was blonde hair with a blonde beard, Christian. And he lived in San Agustin in Colombia, and I'd visited his house numerous times. La Casa de Christian was legendary in the 90s on the Gringo Trail. A lot of gringos had come and hang out with him. And the mushrooms that grew around the area where the San Agustin culture thrived, and all of the statues remain there, Tierra Dentro, and I spent a lot of time with Christian there in San Agustin. But anyway, he was there with us near Santa Rosa de Sucumbis at La Casa de Diomedes and Ophelia. And anyway, the drill sergeant took particular exception to Christian. He was everything he wasn't. He was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Colombian with a long flowing beard, and he wore sandals and a sarong and just got around with his flute and was the freest, most carefree, happy person you've ever met. And the drill sergeant was an angry, frightened and jealous man, as a lot of these soldiers are. And that's what attracts people to the military. They're terrified, frightened little boys. That's what your average soldier is. And that's what these soldiers were. But this little drill sergeant in the khaki shorts and the gumboots was angry as well. And anyway, on the third night, he was convinced to drink. He drew a pistol and pointed at the head of Christian. And Christian went, wah, in melodramatic fashion, tumbled down the hill that he was sitting on. And I thought he'd been shot, but he hadn't. And the drill sergeant screamed, why did you give me this medicine? And then he went up to Diomedes and pushed the shaman back. Why did you give me this medicine? And Diomedes just simply rebounded and went, es mi trabajo. It's my work. It's what I do. And anyway, the drill sergeant screamed and vomited and purged his demons all night and shat himself, and was probably somewhat ashamed when he woke up, because he was screaming and making an absolute child of himself. But we didn't find out, because he passed out in a puddle of vomit And when the dawn came, this is on the fourth morning, the other soldiers, the young kids, they looked at their drill sergeant asleep and just said to us, look, the Sarge is asleep, just go, just split while he's asleep. So we did. We got in our canoes, bid farewell to Diomedes and Ophelia and his kids, and we left. And that is the story of when we were kidnapped, in inverted commas, because we were never tired, by the 32nd Airborne Division of the Colombian military. And I might add, although they were an airborne division, none of them had ever been in, they were a parachute division. None of them had ever jumped out of an airplane, and none of them had a parachute. And they weren't flying around the Amazon at all. They'd come in trucks, and then on foot they'd beat their way through to where we found them. And none of them were yet to ever don a parachute and jump out of an airplane. But I'll try to dig out some of the old photos and share them in a later episode. But I just thought I'd share that story about things. And I might, as one final add on, my medical graduate friend Matt Watts, he got over his fear and was an absolute trooper. He ended up tripping with these guys a couple of nights in a row, helped me disarm a couple of them, and was totally brave and I won't say fearless, but he managed his fear in incredibly brave fashion in the face of a very present and tangible fear and tension that you could cut with a knife. Any one of these kids could have gone on a massacre rampage at any time. I'm back in Bolivia pretty soon, and I hope to send you a few videos from Bolivia as well. But for now, and for the coming months, while my lads need me here in Australia, I'll be giving you some pretty regular installments in Bush Office. Cheers. See you later.